Welcome. My name is Cindy Wright, and I'm a program manager at the Child Neurology Foundation. Today's talk is part of our ongoing series on emerging issues that children and families with neurologic conditions are experiencing as a result of COVID-19. These sessions bring together caregivers and health professionals to have a candid conversation and provide their expert advice to the child neurology community. Today, we're discussing the impact of lost therapy services during COVID-19 and what parents can do in the interim. We have Heather Johanson here today, and Catherine Ashley from KIF1A was going to be our parent interviewer today and help collect the questions from our community, but due to some unforeseen circumstances, she's unable to join us. My son has a neurologic condition and has lost services as well, so I'm very passionate about this topic and will be stepping in to conduct the interview on Catherine's behalf. Welcome, Heather, and thank you for joining us today. And to start, can you just please introduce yourself and share your connection to this topic?
So my name is Heather Johanson. I currently work as an educational consultant and special education advocate in the San Francisco Bay Area. I have a long background in education, 20 years in public schools from elementary all the way through high school. Most of that in special education as an ed specialist, an inclusion specialist, dyslexia interventionist. So just a long history in education. And now I work with families to help them figure that out.
Awesome. Thank you. So to get started, many families are worried about losing ground and what's going to happen when they're losing their regular services. A lot of families are already seeing some regression. And while we're all in different places and facing different issues, we're all worried about our children and wondering what we can do to support them. So what's realistic for families to expect, and can they maintain or even progress in their skills during this time?
That's a great question, and one that I'm being asked kind of over and over and over again. So basically, the answer in a nutshell is yes, with little caveats. So right now, school districts are, depending on the state or even county you're in, are in very different places. Some school districts were quick to figure out how to do the best distance learning as possible, while others are kind of slowly figuring it out, and we're wrapping up the school year. So really what it depends on is how you're going to team with your team. So before, the team was really around your kiddo, and now that team's going to have to come more around you. And part of that is looking at your IEP and thinking, okay, what are the really core things we want to work on and what makes sense at home? Like some very clear, like PT goals are going to be harder to work on depending on the equipment in your home, or certain assistive tech things might be harder to do in your home. So it's looking through your IEP and picking what specific areas you really want to work on with your kiddo, I think with independence in mind, because I know I'm a mom, and trying to help all the kids figure out what they need to do on what day is a little maddening. So really kind of focusing in on what are those like independent skills you really want your kiddo working on, and then teaming with your IEP team to help you do that. And I have a whole bunch of resources at the end that we'll discuss also. But I think really at this juncture, it's about streamlining, kind of picking maybe some really clear communication goals, because you're all home together and it's time to do that. Kind of OT and PT things you can kind of be working on at home. So just that focusing in versus, and I would say really working more like that. Language and math and writing are all really important, but in that time at home, what are you most comfortable as a parent working with your kiddo, and focusing in on that? Because if you're feeling frustrated, it's not going to work as well.
So what are some good tools for prioritizing? I mean, I know a lot of these kids have a lot of skills they need to work on to really gain independence, but like, how do you pick which one's the most important?
Right. I like to kind of think you work from the inside out, right? So when I think of language, you're going to want to work on as much functional language as possible, right? Depending on where your kiddo is. So if like, we're going to talk later about something called core words. So what is the language you really want to be focusing on? And then if you're working on like, what are the OT and PT skills they need to be the most independent. So if it's really just working on that core strength, just keeping up those core strength exercises so that they have that motor control in their arm to eventually be doing the writing or using their AT device. So it's kind of really looking at what are the things they need to, that are going to benefit out the most, basically. So working on a socialization goal with AT right now, like having to say hi and bye. Yeah, maybe, but maybe what you really want to be working on is like the word want. I want this, I want that, using that, and then making sure they're keeping as much of that PT and OT going to keep that core strength or wherever, because every kiddo is so different, right? And what they need. And as parents, we know our kids best, but really like kind of thinking more of that like base layer right now, because if you keep that base nice and solid, it's easier to plug things in later. Whereas if you lose the base, then you have to kind of start all over again.
Right. Yeah, I know Catherine mentioned that with her son, she, what they were working on is him being able to get up and sit at the dinner table and get himself down. So some of those basic skills that some of them maybe had, maybe lost, or maybe just need to maintain, or maybe you've been able to get them to advance because you're home with them a lot, everyone.
Exactly. And that's where you want to work with your team as much as possible. So I know a lot of my families have been working with their teams to bring equipment into the home. So if they have a special chair, like it's that they use during eating time at school, getting that chair home would be great, because then they can still be practicing it with any OT or PT equipment that could be lent out, like a big one of those big balls where they roll on them, like borrowing those, borrowing any assistive tech pieces. I know one of my families, the kiddo has autism, limited speech, and also has some motor stuff, and then has vision stuff. But what they were able to do is hook the AT device to their big screen TV, because he needed big vision, so he could actually participate in some of the Zoom pieces of his classroom, which was really cool, because on that tiny screen it just wasn't working, because one, he couldn't see it, and two, there's no way he could pay attention to it. So it's getting outside the box with your team. And it was a couple iterations of dropping off stuff and trying it and phone calls and all the rest of it, but they really got it going, and he was very much participating with his classroom by the end of shelter in place. So I think it's that partnership with your team, and don't be afraid to ask. I think we don't want to bug them. I get it, because they're really busy, but it's okay to reach out and say, hey, this is what's going on. Here's what I'm thinking. And you two become partners to support your kiddo.
Yeah, I think that was going to be my next question, is how to get the school therapists or even private therapists to really work with you. And I think a lot of that is communicating, these are the goals I'm prioritizing. Do you agree? Here's why. And I know sometimes it's really hard, but I know trying not to be emotional is usually more effective.
Yes.
But I do think parents are afraid to ask. And you're an advocate as well. So are schools required to do all these things, or like some may not?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And basically, as of right now, if a school district is providing services for the general education, if they're providing learning, they need to provide learning for students that need special education. So basically, the FAPE is still a go. The school districts still need to require free and appropriate public education. There is a lot of wiggle right now, and there's so much gray area. No one completely knows what it looks like, but the long and short of it is, yes, you're still supposed to be getting services. And unfortunately, just like normally, you're probably going to have to do some advocating to get the services that you want. And once again, like the way at least my advocacy practice works and my partners work, we're all very collaborative. So it's not approaching it like you're not doing it, but just, hey, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think? And then they get these partnerships going with their teams. And that's where I'm seeing a lot of the best stuff come out. Awesome. Is that partnership piece of, this is what we're working on. What do you think? And a lot of the times, like one of my clients, the OT zooms in with the physical therapist, and then like the mom joins in with her younger son, and they all do it together. So it's just kind of getting outside the box. And like, for instance, I have another set that where the vision specialists and the orientation and mobility specialists come in together, and they work with the kiddo. and sometimes little brother will just join in. So just kind of letting go of like the idea of what therapy is supposed to look like we're supposed to do a 30-minute session and just kind of inviting everyone to be like, okay, we're going to get outside the box. We're all going to do OT together today. We're all going to do PT together today, family time around these things. So just, that's where I'm seeing the most success with families is really where they're like, okay, we know it's not going to be perfect, but we want to keep, what you really want to do is keep that, like I said, keep that nice base there.
Right. And for the families who, single moms, still trying to work, what are some things that they can be doing?
So that is the toughest one. And just how do you make this, because there's the moms that have a lot more time or the families that have a lot more time or a caregiver that's also in there and working. So it is super tough. Like, how do you do it? So at the end of our time together, I'm going to give you a whole bunch of resources, and there's just some play stuff that kids can do that really keep up like those fine and gross motor skills that they could work on kind of more independently without you. And then once again, hit up your team, ask. Like I did have one team, this is once again, every district is different, where they ponied up the one-on-one aid over the summer to do Zoom calls with the kiddo. I have another team where, because every state's different, every county's different, where shelter in place is being relaxed. Right. And they have an aide coming, and the aide is doing work with the kiddo in the front yard. So you can ask. There's no harm in asking for supports. So that's a big piece, is that definitely ask for that extra support, especially if you don't have the support at home. Like, I have been a single mom. I know how tough that is. So you just like you would ask for support normally, feel free to ask for support from your district. And especially in this time, I'm seeing them work a lot more flexibly with certain students.
That's great.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you keep mentioning these resources. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and let you share some of those. All right. Okay. So for, like I said, as we know, every single one of our kids is in a different place. Some kiddos, they're completely fluent. They have they really can get their needs across. But then there's a whole handful of our kids that are using those assistive tech devices or have kind of limited vocabularies. And one thing that really works great is kind of focusing on core words. So 70 to 90% of what we say on a daily basis is about 100 words, which is crazy when you think about it. So just really concentrating in some of those core words could really help a kiddo get their needs across. And that's pretty gigantic when you think about when they get older and they get out into the world more. If they can express themselves more readily, that's going to be a skill that drives them forward. So things like stop, go, get, down, over, all those kind of words are really key. And there's a lot of resources out there to support families with core words. So if we go to that next slide, I want to keep pressing my computer, but I don't. So these 3 links right here are all great resources for core words. Like the individual lessons one will give you the core word card, ideas of what to do with each core word. There's just tons of resources on there. That last one, the pre-made lessons, very at the bottom, it's a subscription, but well worth it, because they have tons of resources for families and for speech and language pathologists, but for families to use too during this time to really help you get in with those core words and give you ideas of how to do it. So, and then the next slide, I'll just give you an example. And just to let everyone know, we will be posting a link to a document that has all these links active. So don't worry about writing them all down. Don't be scribbling, but basically, like, how would you implement this at home? And then this works also depending on the ages of your kids. So if you have some younger ones that are working on building their vocabulary, this works as kind of a family thing. So let's say you have the word of your week or month or 2 weeks is want. You put it in a big place in your household, just write it on a piece of paper, stick it on the fridge. You're going to read the books, and every time you see the word want, you have the kiddo press the button on their AAC device, and then kind of tally it. And every time somebody says it, make a big deal out of it.
You can trace it. You can do cooking activities. I want this. I want that. Make collages of things that they want, do predictable, toys. I want toys, like just being able to play with that, reading books, and just constantly kind of really making a lot of attention around that word want for the week. And like on those past resources page, there's more ideas too, but just really focusing in on kind of what are the two, like think of like the 2 to 5 words. If your kiddo had them, it would make such a huge difference in their communication. Because even if they can kind of get 5 to 10 core words, it will change up their ability to let you know what they want, what they need, and communicating with their family. And this is also where you can really work with your SLP and your assistive tech person, depending on who's on your team. Say, hey, I want to focus on this. Can you help me?
Okay. For the kids who aren't verbal, because I know some of the kids in our family aren't verbal, I think there's often, we had another talk with an expert on nonverbal kids, and it's cues, pointing at things, if they can do that. Sometimes I know one of the moms says it's the lifting of the eyebrows, as she knows, is a communication. So there's a
ton you can do there. And even on that resource page before, it does talk about students that are nonverbal, have no vocabulary whatsoever, and are really using the AAC device, because that's pretty huge. So a lot of this is around AAC devices and just using that core word on their AAC device of just learning how to say stop, go, or I want, right? So just that is a huge piece here. A lot of this is structured around not even being able to articulate the word, being able to use the AAC device to give that word.
Awesome. Okay. And this slide.
So on this one, it's just all sorts of things that we just don't think about as learning, but as huge learning, even for our I used to teach high school, and I bring Play-Doh into high school, and you would think I was the most magic human ever, because you're never too old for Play-Doh. But it's pretty huge for any sort of fine and gross motor piece, and you can use it for just about anything. And for those of us that are busy and have other jobs and have maybe multiple kids at home, this is a great way to get them working on those foundational skills. Like if you can play with the Play-Doh and roll it with your hands, you're doing all sorts of hand strengthening. Like Play-Doh is one of OT's kind of favorite tools out there. So each of these is live linked to, like for the Play-Doh, it's a Play-Doh recipe, or you can just order it on Amazon. And then everything else is linked to where you can find it on Amazon. So like big perler beads for like the big ones. The little ones are too little, but those bigger ones for just kind of those fine motor skills, sensory tables, exercise balls, foam blocks. And in it kind of shows which core words you could use. Like if you're using foam blocks and you have maybe even your older student working with your student that's working on their AAC device, and say, okay, where should I put this? Should I put it in front or behind? And then the student can press their AAC device and press front, and like helping them build that foam block tower. Mr. Potato Head is great, once again, for those motor skills of the hand. Big Chalk is probably one of my favorites. It's hours of good times outside and out of the house, which for us moms is kind of fantastic. And it's great reciprocal feedback, and you can do so much cool stuff. The obstacle course that's in purple has a link that shows you a different way to make obstacle courses. And this could be for a student that needs a chair as well. Like, how do you work your way around? You can do big swirlies and all the rest of it. So it really kind of works for whoever. You can dial it up or dial it different ways to support different types of learners. So there's just a bunch of ideas on there for you that's all linked if you want to just go find it.
Mm-hmm.
And then good old apps, because we're all relying on technology at this point. I know my family is spending a lot more time playing Roblox and Minecraft than they were before. So here's just some great apps that you can use that are really more visual in nature. Like drag it. So if you have a kiddo that's kind of working on like number sense, all of those are great. For language and reading, Super Y is wonderful in the sense that it's through PBS. and it's got a nice visual and story to it, and it's really working on kind of those critical thinking inferential pieces at a level that's very accessible for a lot of students. Bob's books are definitely my favorite, very predictive texts and have a good story, and they're just a nice app and pretty much most, once again, very accessible. And then just general skills. Like the Toka House one is great because it really helps with, once again, that language piece of put, here, there, and it's just a lot of dragging. So depending on how much motor you have, there's a lot you can do with it.
Right.
And then good old jigsaw puzzles.
Although they're hard to find online now.
Yeah, they are. So that's the one link, and all of these are linked to where you're like, okay, you can find them. And then for the families that need it, I think most of this is where, once again, you probably shouldn't have to do this yourself. This would be a great thing to reach out to your team and say, hey, what was the schedule they were using at school? What icons? Part of my work is I still mentor some teachers, special education teachers. And this was the first thing they did with their families, is send home all the icons and different apps or different scheduling pieces they use, because that really helps bring that school piece home in that structure. But just in case you don't have that, here's some great idea, like just really easy things you can use for just a daily schedule, or just for the point piece, like I need, I want, or whatever students need, just to have that visual icon.
Yeah, we had another talk too, and I think that he really expressed the importance of a consistent schedule, which I think is really hard at home.
Mm-hmm.
But as best as you can to have a regular routine of first you do school and then you do play in the yard, and that maybe you can do it at the exact time of the day because of your schedule, but maybe you can at least do the same order. Things to help routines be as consistent as possible given our different situations. And even little things he mentioned, like don't say, oh, we're going to log online with your teacher, and oh, we're going to watch your teacher on the screen, like, or we're going to do school now. Always calling it the same thing helps kiddos learn that, because at school the teachers are trained to do that all the time. We're not.
Yeah, exactly.
So a lot of learning for us parents.
Yeah, it's so much learning. And yeah, just having that visual schedule, because you don't even have to stick to time periods. It could kind of just be chunks of time, because I know it's hard for me to just be like, oh, 10 o'clock we're going to do this, and 10:30 we're going to, like, that's just not realistic for where we are. But I did make my 11-year-old sort of a visual schedule of like, okay, like here's the chunk of things you need to get done in the morning, and here's a chunk of things you need to get done in the afternoon, and she just sort of checks them off, and it just becomes less of a battle, which is super helpful.
Yeah.
And you can do that however it works with your kiddo. So if it's, you just know, like, toileting time is a really hard one, and it's pretty, here's the icon, and when you're done you can take the icon off and put it away. There's something very satisfying about that for students, of like, it's done, so they can rip it off and get rid of it, or they check it off or whatever. That just, it gives you a little dopamine hit in your head. So that makes sense.
Yeah, I know my son, when I have a big long list, that's overwhelming. So for him, it's showing a few things at a time. So then he doesn't like, oh my God, I have to do all that today. So yeah, but we all know our kids.
And choice, like, okay, you have 2 activities, 2 icons to choose from. Which one do you want to do? And it could just be, an eyeball track of like, that's the one. Okay, great. We're going to do this one.
Awesome. Okay.
So just other things to have, just because I know we're all learning as we're going. Just if you haven't done, depending on what are those core things you want to be working on with your student in this time. If you really have a lot of pragmatic goals, Michelle Garcia Winner's Social Thinking is some of the best stuff out there. And there's a link to her site. And then there's a whole bunch of just like top 10 speech and language pathologist apps. So if you have a kiddo that's working on articulation, there's a lot of good apps in there. Different things you can do for gross motor and PT ideas, just sort of like, I don't know what to do with how to do this stuff. And once again, it could be having an older sibling do this stuff with your son or daughter, or even doing it as a younger and an older. So there's just lots of ways you can do this. It doesn't have to look like school. How about that? It can just be something kind of fun you do in the backyard.
Awesome. And so these, and the PT one?
So the bottom is just like, these are YouTube videos you can just watch, and it's just a bunch of just different physical therapy ideas that a mom did in her home. And just things of just like having, like she had a skateboard from one of her older sons, and her daughter had really low tone, and she was pushing herself on the skateboard, and then would kind of push herself across and grab, and then have to push herself back on the skateboard, all while sitting in nice and safe. So just different ideas of things that you might have at home that you could work on some of this stuff with. And I think the biggest thing for moms is our moms and dads and families, we're pretty hard on ourselves, and like, we're not doing enough. And just remember, you're doing plenty. Just keep the conversations going, and they need us to not be super stressed, because that's not going to be helpful either. And just know that you're not alone in this, that there are so many families figuring this out, and everyone's been on timeout. That's the other thing to think about. Like, it's not school has continued and everyone's been making these big leaps and bounds, that everyone's kind of gone to this distance learning model, and it's been hit or miss with all types of kids. So just kind of keep that in mind, that it's not, yes, it feels like kids are getting massively left behind, but it's been a very crazy couple months for everybody. And every single teacher is going to need to do some serious restarting and remediation when we get back to school.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you, Heather. This has been so helpful. I really appreciate your expertise. I know our community will as well. And well, this concludes our conversation for today. We have more resources on our website, COVID-19 specific ones, at childneurologyfoundation.org/COVID-19. Together we will get through this, and together we are Child Neurology.